Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Boggs fan. Every once in a while, I get a little philosophical when it comes to the sports card hobby and content creation channels on YouTube. It was maybe a few days ago. I was just browsing YouTube, just looking up videos related to sports cards, baseball cards, different videos, different channels. I've done this in the past before, but as I started doing some searching, I started to see a pattern emerge that, at least on the side of YouTube, that the channels and or videos that received the most views, channels with the most subscribers, tended to be ones that primarily focused on modern cards. And it could be breakers, it could be showing off PSA reveals, submission stuff, open up new packs, boxes, all the different things, mail days, things like that. And I just got to thinking, compared to other channels like myself that are at least, if not majorly, primarily dealing with vintage cards, that those channels, for the most part, don't have as many subscribers. The videos don't have as many views. And the more I thought about it, I can see there's some pretty obvious reasons why. But in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, which is the title of this video, are vintage sports cards boring? And again, there may be some obvious reasons why more people collect modern cards than vintage cards, and I understand that. But again, I just wanted to get on here and do a video with just some of my thoughts on this sort of topic. Obviously, if you are watching this video and collect vintage cards, this video probably isn't for you, because you probably enjoy collecting vintage cards and don't think it's boring. I myself do not think vintage cards are boring. In fact, at the end of this video, I'm going to have a link to an older video of mine titled Why I Like Vintage Baseball Cards. So obviously I don't find it boring. But again, the more I thought about this, there's certain things that I can understand why, to some collectors, vintage may be boring and uninteresting. For one, retired players, their stats are never going to change. You're not going to look up yesterday's box score and see if Mickey Mantle hit a home run, or Reggie Jackson struck out again, or how many strikeouts did Nolan Ryan have. Their stats are done. They're not winning any more MVP awards. They're not winning any more World Series. Their history in baseball has been written. Whereas modern players have current stats. They're building upon their career. So there's always something new and exciting about modern players, and hence the sports cards that follow those players. And you can't watch the retired players play anymore, which is pretty obvious. You can't go to the ballpark and see Ted Williams hit, Ty Cobb steal a base, Pete Rose get another hit. You can't see it. Now you can go and maybe find archival, video of an old All-Star game or World Series game or something like that, and watch that. But you can't see these players play in person anymore. So again, the interest in those retired players is limited, and I understand that. The other thing, in terms of actual sports cards, is for modern cards, they're always coming out with new product. For vintage, that's it. They're not making any more vintage cards. Whatever's out there that hasn't already been destroyed or thrown away by kids' moms, that's it. Now, again, you may have modern cards depicting veteran players, like those Topps SP short prints that I've been collecting. but playing day cards have all been made, and whatever's out there is out there, and all it is buying and selling within that same group of number of cards out there. Modern cards, every year there's multiple releases, new cards to chase, and all that stuff. So I can see how that can be more exciting. And again, maybe throughout this video, the more things I talk about, maybe it'll become more clear why. But I would venture to say that in terms of getting to YouTube and content creators and the videos that they put out, I venture to say the majority, maybe even the vast majority of those who subscribe to my channel collect vintage. Now, maybe just a little or a lot, but at least they have some vintage cards in their collection and are still maybe picking up some vintage cards here and there. I mean, they may also have a modern focus as well. And again, I would tend to believe that most of the people that are watching this video, I hope that's not the case, but I would guess that the majority that are watching this video clicked on it because they do not find vintage sports cards boring. But it would be nice that if some of the modern collectors are checking this out and would be able to give their feedback on this. It's interesting. I'm looking at the videos that I've put out on my channel. I've made over 300 videos, and of those 300 videos, the second most watched video that I have put out there is the one where I opened a factory set that I purchased at Walmart of 2021 Topps to see if I got one of the parallel versions. I've had over 1,200 views of that video. Other ones I've had, maybe 4, 5, 600, and those are typically ones that have been on my channel for a while and stuff like that. But just found it interesting that most of my videos deal with obviously my Boggs collection, but also vintage cards. But one of the few videos that I did dealing with modern cards, that one just has a ton of views. So again, I think that out there in YouTube channels and videos, that it's just one that the ones that are putting out content of modern cards are the ones that really grow, have maybe tens of thousands of subscribers and get several thousand views on each of their videos. Again, which is fine. I'm not complaining. And again, this isn't a rant video. This is just something that I decided to put out there because, again, I just started thinking about things, whether this makes all sense or not. Another aspect is I would venture to say that, you go to card shows, and again, maybe with a few exceptions, I would think that more of the dealers would be dealing with modern cards than vintage cards. Not that there's not a lot of money in vintage cards. There could be a lot of money in vintage cards. But I think it's a small slice of the hobby that are interested in vintage cards. So not as many people are collecting vintage cards, I guess. I think it also goes to demographics. I would tend to say, as I slowly approach 50, that those who collect vintage cards, I would say, are part of the older group of collectors out there, that a lot of the younger collectors, again, who are into the watching current games, following their team, are more into modern cards and just don't find vintage interesting. But if I had to make one argument or one push or to promote why I think vintage cards should not be considered boring, and there may be others, and again, I'd like to hear in the comments what other arguments you may make. But I go back to when I was in high school, and maybe even junior high, but in school, and you would take a history class, Now, when I took history in school, I always enjoyed it. I was fascinated by history and things that happened and so on, but I know a good number of my fellow classmates who thought it was boring as all get out. Why should I care about learning about something that happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago? Why? Why even learn about it? Who cares? All that's important is what's happening now and maybe what maybe happening tomorrow. Well, the way I look at it, and this in my mind can equate to the sports card hobby, again, content on YouTube and all that stuff, is by understanding and learning about the past and appreciating the past, it can help explain the present. It gives context to the present. Without knowing, appreciating, understanding the past, everything that happens now would be in a vacuum. And this can go toward sports and the sports card hobby in terms of records, statistics, career records or records that may or may not ever be broken. If you do not know what happened in the past, how do you know what someone's current statistics, how important they are? Take, for example, let's say next year, a player hits 50 home runs and steals 50 bases next year. Okay, that sounds good. Well, how good is that? How big of an accomplishment would that be? Without knowing the past, players that played before, records that have been held, there's no context. You don't know, you don't have anything to compare it to. And by the way, if you haven't looked it up, if you didn't know, there have been 0 players in the history of baseball to hit 50 home runs and steal 50 bases in the same season. Now, I think I read that Barry Bonds and Brady Anderson did it, but it was over 2 seasons, which obviously doesn't count. And I'm sure there's more than that if you look at 2 seasons. But anyway, in one season, at least from what I looked up, there have been 0 players in the history of baseball that have hit 50 home runs and stolen 50 bases in the same season. Now, that makes that performance by that player a lot more impressive than just saying, hey, yeah, I hit 50 home runs, I stole 50 bases, yay for me. It puts a whole new light on that player's achievement. And so I think for those out there that are just focused on collecting modern cards, that's great. And again, this isn't an argument why you should do this or should not do that. It's not my place to do that. You collect what you love and enjoy. That's the whole purpose of this hobby. Collect what you love. And don't let anyone else tell you to do anything differently. But I'm just trying to get to the concept of why some collectors, and there may not be all collectors, there could be flipping involved and investing, which again could lead to its own reasons of why, hey, I'm not interested at all in vintage because I can't make any money there. I can't flip vintage cards or whatever. But I think there's a compelling reason that if you do collect just modern cards, at least consider vintage cards. Learn more about vintage cards. Again, maybe you collect a certain player that plays for a certain team, and you want to know more of the history about that team, the players that played on that team in the past, and what they've accomplished. And maybe that'll broaden your enjoyment of the hobby, the sport. And so don't necessarily discount either watching content on YouTube, subscribing to channels that may be dealing with vintage cards. Broadening your knowledge in this hobby is a good thing. and you may find some enjoyment in collecting vintage cards. So again, if you're watching this, you're probably one who collects vintage. Still would like to know your comments about my ramblings here, whether you agree with me, disagree, if I missed maybe some points as to why people may think vintage is boring. If you're not into vintage and are just into modern cars and you happen to be watching this video, one, I appreciate it, thank you. But two, let me know your thoughts. Again, you won't offend me. If you say, John, yeah, I have no interest at all in vintage, it's boring, I hate it, that's fine. Hey, we're all entitled to our own opinions. Hopefully this video won't get any dislikes, because again, I'm not trying to force anyone's opinion, change anyone's mind, put anyone down, but just want to get thoughts, start a discussion as to whether you think collecting vintage sports cards is boring. So appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed this video, would appreciate you supporting my channel by hitting that like button. If you'd like to watch a similar video of mine, you can do it right here. If you're not currently subscribed and enjoy watching videos of vintage and modern baseball cards, you can subscribe to my channel right here. And better yet, click that bell to be notified the next time I upload a video. That's all I have for you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.